So, when you think of Jim Carrey, which movie comes to mind? Yes, man? Mr. Popper's Penguins? Sonic the Hedgehog? There are many movies that might pop into your mind, but for me, there are about 5 solid movies that I think about. Ace Ventura: Pet Dick, Liar Liar, The Majestic, where Jim actually gets to stretch his rather impressive dramatic acting chops, The Number 23, which is definitely nothing like any of his usual movies, and The Mask, also Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, so I guess 6. The Mask shows Jim Carrey as both a somewhat regular guy and his alter ego, a complete clown. Now, I know people who just don't like Jim Carrey movies. They don't think he's funny. But they give this one a pass based on the premise. When Jim's normal, he acts like a normal person. When he wears the mask, he's anything but normal. And the size of those teeth would make a beaver jealous. The movie starts out with a down-on-your-luck banker named Stanley Ipkiss meeting a really hot chick. And for those of you who don't know, this was actually the lovely Cameron Diaz's first ever appearance on film. I'm sure she was hired for her acting chops as much as her other assets. So while flirting with the hopelessly enthralled Stanley, it's revealed, oh no, she's not just a pretty face. She's also working for a criminal and targeting the bank. Why are the pretty ones always crazy? Then you go and get to see who's planning the heist and meet the coolest guy in the entire movie.
Motion detectors are a pain in the ass.
But you can pull this off, right?
Hey, you talking to the doctor.
I'm sure that Mr. Cool will be with us a long time. Hold on. Oh, never mind. In the arms of the angel. So Stanley goes to the mechanic shop where they are very clearly and openly crooked. They lend him the loner.
The loner. The loner?
The loner?
Shows up to the club in a clunker that honestly made my first car look amazing by comparison. And while his friend has his eyes on some assets, Stanley is left behind. When he tries to cross the rope...
Watch it, I'm a leader! You put me down right now, or I am never coming back here! Ha! Oh!
And as life does, while he's down in the gutter, the lovely Tina comes along to make sure there is a witness to his humiliation. Ah, love. When the loner breaks down, Stanley decides to go for a night swim to cool off. As he swims, he finds a pile of trash and a mask. Deciding to take this gross wooden mask home with him, he gets the urge to try it on, and I don't think he washed it off first. And what happens next? Jim Carrey ascends to his rightful spot as a live-action cartoon character. Suddenly, the bumbling, clumsy Stanley is a green-faced tornado, and the shenanigans ensue. First, he scares some old lady nearly to death. Thank God she believes in the Second Amendment, however, she does not believe in good gun safety. After this, he stands in the road, and while a guy gets annoyed, he assaults him. Jeez, I don't remember this guy being such a jerk. As he's strolling along, a gang decides to have some fun, and...
Now. Sorry, wrong pocket.
Wow, thank goodness I didn't get this as a kid. He pulls a Tommy gun out of thin air and proves that he has worse aim than stormtroopers. So he decides he can be a superhero. I mean, so far he's been a superhero just like Homelander. So he decides to pay the mechanics a visit, and he shoves a tailpipe into their tailpipe. I mean, for these guys, yeah, just let it happen. I don't feel bad for them. The next morning, the cops are at his door, and he realizes what happened last night wasn't a dream. He rolls into work late, and a reporter starts to ask him a few questions. Peggy is just looking for a scoop. She's a young go-getter who just wants to do something other than her weekly column. You get to see bad guys doing bad things, and the next coolest guy in the movie is introduced. Turns out Dorian is a little Sith apprentice, and he wants to take out his master and rule the galaxy. Oops, wrong fan base. So, after a weird dream where Tina goes all weird puppy and starts licking him, this wakes him up, and that night his boner gets the best of him and he goes for another round as the Mask. One quick bank robbery later and the cops show up in time to take on Dorian's goons. He gets away and they deal with the cops, and the coolest man in the movie takes a bullet. He slides by the club and makes it rain. When he sees the lovely Tina, this happens. I bet that's not the only thing that's throbbing. So, without asking, he forces her to dance with him, spinning her around so fast her insides likely turn to pulp. Despite this, he continues his advances like some green Harvey Weinstein. You get to see the doctor and...
Here you go, buddy. Suck on it.
He's gone. Rest in peace, my friend. Then the bad guy shows up to ruin the Mask's state. Dorian demands his money, but the Mask is far from willing to play ball. The cops show up just as the Mask disappears, but a clue leaves the chief detective suspicious about Stanley. The next morning he pays Ipkiss a visit. This interview doesn't go well, and Calloway remains suspicious. Then they see Dorian offer 50 grand for... Wait, why are you trying to rob a bank for money if you have that kind of money to just throw down? I mean, do you... I have that right? I mean, great. This was in the 90s, so this was like basically 100 grand back then. So Stanley shows up late to work again and is chewed out by a spoiled rich boss that runs the place. But perhaps having gained confidence and maybe a bit of sleep deprivation, he made him respond with more balls than he actually had.
Back off, monkey boy!
Before I tell your daddy you're running this place like it's your own personal piggy bank. Or maybe we should call the IRS and see if we can arrange a little vacation for you at Club Fat. You'd like to see him again, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't mind.
And Stanley tells her that he knows who he is, and they can arrange a date. Later that evening, the Mask and Tina meet again, and if he was a bit horny the other night in the club, that was child's play. He goes on full near-on rapist at this point, sending clear signs that she said no, she needs him in the balls. And it hurts for a moment, but doesn't deter him. It isn't until the police show up that she's able to get away. So they search him and find all sorts of stuff, including...
Picture of Calloway's wife.
What?
Uh-oh.
Margaret! You son of a bitch!
Jeez, I figured you had a sense of humor. After all.
You married her! Ah!
That's gotta hurt.
This chase leads to the best party of all time that ever involved cops. Jim Carrey proves he's basically a cartoon character and that he can sing before escaping. As he pulls off the mask, the police show that they are trigger happy. This must be in Los Angeles. I mean, does a non-violent criminal usually get lead thrown at him if he's trying to escape? I mean, I thought they tried to tase, since he wasn't a violent offender. Do I have that wrong? So Peggy commits felony by helping him escape the cops. But as Stanley is bearing his soul to her, she kicks him while he's down by turning him into Dorian. Ain't that just like a woman? So, instead of turning him into a smear on the newspapers, they drop him right off in front of the police unit. Now, I find it absolutely fascinating that Calloway didn't see Dorian's goon drop him off. This man is a detective like I'm a stripper. Dorian realizes that Tina's betrayed him, and he decides for a little payback. Stanley ends up behind bars and hears her scream right outside the police precinct. Of course, it's a perfect place to commit a crime. Apparently, these are the deafest, most incompetent cops in existence, and that's a pretty high bar. And so Milo, his little pooch companion, decides to save the day. As Stanley is escaping from jail, Tina finds that Dorian has plans to have one hell of a party. Stanley comes face to face with Calloway and manages, despite being in the middle of a police station, to escape. All it took was one sentence: "He's got a gun!" But logic doesn't exist in this world. So no cops see him as he's holding up Calloway and moving through the station. Even Calloway tries to tell somebody, but he does it in pig Latin, and the guy is too stupid to understand. So Dorian gets dressed in his Sunday best and goes back to the club. With Stanley, the mask made him change into a rubbery version of himself, but he maintained his relative size and shape. Dorian becomes a freaking Hulk, and even his voice changes.
Who the hell are you? I'm just the next employee who's come for his back pay, or should I say payback?
He kills his boss, and thus the only other cool guy in the movie is gone. Stanley shows that he knows absolutely nothing about guns as he runs the entire time with his finger on the trigger. Terrible weapon discipline. Terrible. Stanley gets into the club and takes a man out off screen, because there's no way that they could convincingly have Paperweight Jim take on the bouncer. So Dorian decides to break up with Tina in the most explosive way possible. When Stanley is once again captured and is about to be tied up with Tina, she uses her feminine wiles to convince Dorian for one last smoochy doodle. And the horniness of men foils him. All he had to do was say, "Nah, I'm good." That's it, and he won. But the power of boners prevails. She kicks the mask and it becomes Milo in the Mask versus the Goons, and Stanley versus Dorian. Naturally, the good guys win. Stanley gets the mask and saves the day by swallowing a spicy meatball. The movie ends with Stanley choosing the hot mama over the mask. Milo and horny man Charlie compete for the mask, and that's the end. There certainly wasn't a sequel that's part nightmare fuel, part stroke.
What the hell is even that?
Jim Carrey's one of those actors who's very physical with his comedy. His face and voices are hilarious throughout. There are several lines from this that I quote frequently, even if no one else gets it. This movie is a product of its time and is a classic to me. It has always brought a smile to my face when I needed it, and that's the magical power of comedy. It can kill a tense moment in seconds, or bring a smile to a sad face. And Jim Carrey in his prime was one of my favorite comedians. My family, who know me, knew that once upon a time I could quote Liar Liar basically from the beginning to end, without the movie playing. Yeah, I know, I'm a weirdo. Cameron Diaz delivers a great performance as a young woman who knows how to use her looks to her advantage, but she also does have a heart. When Stanley charms her, she turns on Dorian and his gang. And speaking of Dorian, this guy wasn't really in much that I know of. But he did a fine job here. I just wonder why he went all Hulk mode when Stanley doesn't. From the beginning to end, this movie is paced fairly well. The jokes land, and they let the serious moments breathe. It was something that was very common back in the days, but not so much anymore. I will always love The Mask. As a kid, I used to try and move like him, which often left to me falling or knocking things over in my lunacy. While this isn't my favorite movie by him, it definitely holds up as one of his greats. So what did you think of The Mask? Did you like Jim Carrey and think he's funny, or not? What happens to be your favorite movie by him? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time in the Twisted Nightmare Studio.